the single biggest mistake that businesses make that cause them to fail and not succeed. And that is to take their eye off the ball. What does that mean? I see a lot of people that start businesses, they get really good at it. In fact, sometimes they become profitable at it. And it's interesting because when I speak to them, I say, are you doing more of the things that you said that you're doing that gets you that result? And they say, no, I'm doing something else. And some of you refer to this as the shiny object syndrome. We see something new, we start doing that. Now, it's not to say that we should keep doing one thing, but we should keep doing one thing until it stops being effective. And then we can evolve to something else. In fact, I just did a little tour here. I'm currently in Rome, as you can probably tell. This is the Roman Forum. And one of the biggest reasons why the Roman Empire fell is because they moved the capital. That means that we kind of take our eye off the ball. So if you have one business that's succeeding and you're making money in it, then you double down on that while spending 70% of the time in that, but 30% of the time moving to something else. Now you say, well, John, is that contradicting? No, because people do it simultaneously at the same time. It's like trying to juggle 50 balls at the same time. You cannot. If you're juggling one ball, it's pretty easy. You go two balls, pretty easy. But we've got to really stop focusing on the things that actually contribute and also are sustaining, but also build an ecosystem around that. So I've seen a lot of people, when they start businesses, they keep jumping from one thing to another thing to another thing. I'll tell you the biggest problem with that. Every time you jump from one thing to another thing, you are causing a new learning curve. If you look at a learning curve operates, it's kind of slow at the start. And then the more you do it, the more you start to increase. The more it starts to grow, the faster it gets. And the same is true when you're trying to do multiple things at the same time. It's not just one learning curve. I mean, the business is hard enough. Then you're trying to add multiple things to that. It gets even worse. So you've got to start focusing on the things that really are complementary. So for example, if you're marketing, if you're doing social media, if you have a business, if you're trying to do well in your job, trying to get a promotion, whatever you're trying to do, here's the thing, here's a secret, right? You don't have to get good at a lot of things. You just have to get good at a few things. And when you get good at a few things and you do them well, and these few things that you do have to be complementary. For example, when people say to me, John, like, how do you create successful businesses? The first thing I look for is distribution channel. Is this business I'm investing in? Is this business I'm starting? Is this business I'm buying? Do they have a distribution channel? Meaning, can they at any time click a button and thousands of people can see that message? If the answer is no, then it's very hard for that business to get traction. I see too often that businesses, again, are jumping from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing. When in actual fact, if you are going to do that, it needs to be complementary within an ecosystem. That's why when you take the eye off the ball, I know a lot of you know that the things that you do is distracting from what you're doing. I was just in Montreal and I was with one of my clients and I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm doing this and this does $250,000 a year. And I said, I'm doing this, and there's like 4 other businesses in there. And I said to him, out of all these businesses, which one is producing the most income? And he said, this one. And I said, why are you not doing more of that? Because it's kind of like the Bruce Lee quote. He said, I fear not the man that can do 1,000 kicks, i.e. a lot of 1,000 businesses, right? He said, I fear the man that can do one kick 1,000 times. Now, if I translate that, it sounds like I'm contradicting, but if you look deeper into it, it's not just doing one thing the right way. It's doing one thing many different ways until it works, and then you find a different angle. Because when you do something, I'll give an example, when we are running our marketing awareness for our businesses, it keeps working until it stops working, and then we do something else. But the problem is, you change too many variables at the same time, it's very hard to scale. So for example, if we're changing the copy, if we're changing the creative, if we're changing the targeting, we change all three at the same time, there are multiple different variations of them. That's why it's so important to be able to do something in a way that allows you to do one thing that can scale fast and quick, and then you can just keep going at it. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen a lot of people do, and I've been doing this for 20 years, is seeing people jump from one thing to another without finalizing. It's okay to jump to other things. I had a coach call with a friend of mine, and he's like, John, I met this guy and he said, I should just be doing this one thing and double down on it. Yes and no. Yes, if it's working. No, if it's not scaling. If you have to find you're pushing really, really hard just to squeeze that little bit of juice out, that's the sign to angle and re-angle to something else in the same thing. Let me give you an example. I see a lot of people when they're advertising, they use Facebook advertising and they keep squeezing it and keep squeezing it. And eventually, for whatever reason, the cost per lead just goes through the roof. It's too expensive to market and they keep throwing more money at it. Well, have you considered doing something else like YouTube advertising or Google advertising or TikTok advertising or sponsorship advertising or exhibition advertising or affiliate advertising or referral advertising? You see? They miss out on all these other things because they said no to other things to focus on one thing. And even when it's evident that they are getting this, what we call resistance level, that's why they don't grow, they don't succeed, they can't scale. My advice for all of you right now who's watching this video is whatever you're going through, whatever challenges you're facing, whatever you are facing right now that's causing problems, that's just like you're hitting your head against a brick wall, trying to move one of these borders. Is funny because I was in the Colosseum here in Rome, and our guy said to us, this whole Colosseum used to be basically laid in marble. A lot of it is made. I said, where's the marble? And people would come and steal the marble. How do you think about that? Well, marble is not exactly that light, but they take the marble and they put in the other things and they repurpose it, recycle it. And if you've ever been to the Colosseum, there's holes in the columns. So why are there so many holes here? Because people are actually drilling into the columns to basically pull the metal out to use for weapons. Why am I telling you that? It's the repurposing of things that you need to do in order to create success. Sometimes you've got to sacrifice one thing to produce something else here. And that's why if you're in business right now, I mean, a lot of you who've watched my channel, really there's only 3 steps you focus on. The first step is getting your business model right and having a game plan. Once you've got the game plan right, okay, now we go into the first phase, which is your MVP, your minimum viable product, meaning we want to market out there to be able to get a test to see whether this thing works or not. Once that thing works, then you go into scalability. And then when you go into scalability, you're going to hit a flat line. Once you hit that flat line, the next part is then fine tuning. These are the 4 steps on how you actually can overcome this problem of people just jumping from thing to thing. Because a lot of people do one thing, they don't know when to shift. The signs of when to shift is when resistance is coming and just like you're pushing this boulder up this hill, and it feels like a lot of work to produce that same result. If that is the case, you have to switch and you need to pivot. Right, you need to pivot. That's the whole key to this. So don't switch from one thing to the other thing and take your eye off the ball. You pivot into the new ball. And that's how I've operated a lot of my businesses. The businesses that have done really well and profitable follow this process. And that pivot point is typically between 6 to 9 years, I see. Again, you go, John, how long have you been doing this? A lot of businesses, like when I go into, I always ask them, how long have you been in business? In fact, the business that I like to go into and scale, because my business model is I would advise companies in exchange for equity, right? They also pay a fee. So the companies that I'm going to spend time with are the ones that are at that 6 or 7 year mark. And that's the thing that you know whether they've got legs to stand on, whether they're going to be successful. So don't take your eye off the ball and pivot too soon, but also don't take your eye off the ball and pivot too late. There is the sweet spot. If you think of a Venn diagram, you've got 2 circles, right? And 2 circles that kind of have this Venn diagram, right? And you get the sweet spot. Once you hit that sweet spot, that's when you know that transition needs to happen. And actually 70 to 80% of the time should be the same thing that you're doing. And 20% of your time needs to be your R&D time. When I say R&D time, what do I mean? You've got to dedicate time and resources to trying something new and taking risks. Otherwise, you'll never know. I'll give an example. A lot of you know that I have a software company. I have a real estate company, I have a consulting company, an education company, and a lot of the things, for example, let's take the consulting. So my belief was, well, people pay me a very high fee to spend one-on-one time, but it has to be face-to-face. But would they pay the same if it was, just on the camera or on Zoom? And until I tested it out, I never knew. Turns out that I actually don't have to be face-to-face when I'm consulting, and they still pay the high fee. I prefer face-to-face because I have a better connection and I can really work with people at the nitty-gritty details. But this is what I want you to start thinking about. Just think about scale, think about growth, think about doing new things. Stop doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I know sometimes making change is scary. I know that sometimes doing something that you've never done before, the fear of the unknown, can lose money. And most of the times it will, but there'll be that one time where it clicks. I've been walking around here in Rome. We set the system that's working on autopilot, making revenue on autopilot. And had I not tested that, I tested it a few times, it didn't work. But it's fine-tuning the things, and now we've got it to work, and it's been consistent. We tested it first time, second time, third time, and now it's consistent. So now it's scalable. So we just pump in the front end, the back end works. That's why you got to start focusing on these things. By the way, if you know anyone who's struggling in business, send this video to them. And the next video I'm going to start creating is, okay, how do we do some of these processes? How do we do AI? How do we do social media? How do we do scale? How do we create branding? How do we create wealth? In fact, my new book, Money Unlocked, talks a lot about that, actually. By the way, if you would love to attend any of our live business accelerators, I'll put a link in the description. Check out some of the dates that are coming up. I'd love to share some of these strategies with you. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you next training. Subscribe to this video, leave any questions below, and check out this video here as well.